Put it all together, and what have you got?
Murder, my dear Watson.
Refined,
Cold-blooded,
deliberate murder.
Murder?
Must return to Baker Street and undertake another investigation.
The name's Sherlock Holmes and the address is 221B Baker Street.
Sherlock Holmes. Please don't get comfortable, we won't be here long.
Mr. Holmes?
Hello.
My name is Sherlock Holmes. It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Sherlock Holmes, created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in 1887, is literature's most iconic detective, originally appearing in 56 short stories published in Strand magazine, as well as 4 novels. The character's unique blend of logic, observation and eccentricity revolutionised the detective genre, influencing countless adaptations across literature, film and television. Holmes's methods of deduction and his partnership with Dr. John Watson have established a template and gold standard for detective duels, while his residence at 221B Baker Street has turned into a cultural landmark. Holmes reflects Victorian society's fascination with science and rationality, and his enduring appeal speaks to our collective intrigue with mystery and the complexities of human nature, making Holmes a timeless figure in popular culture and a catalyst for discussions around crime, morality and intelligence. Holmes has been portrayed in countless ways across literature, film and TV, reflecting the changing cultural landscape and audience preferences, from more traditional interpretations such as those by Basil Rathbone and Peter Cushing, emphasising his astute observational skills and Victorian gentleman persona, to more modern iterations, like those in BBC's Sherlock and CBS's Elementary, featuring Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller respectively, presenting a more contemporary and flawed character grappling with personal issues alongside his brilliance. Each portrayal highlights different facets of the iconic character, from the quintessential detective to a more emotionally nuanced individual, demonstrating Holmes' enduring adaptability and relevance across generations. In the early 1980s, nearly 100 years after the character's creation, Granada Television sought to bring the icon to the screen once more, this time with an emphasis on maintaining fidelity to Conan Doyle's original writings and period setting. The show was an instant hit, and ran for 9 series over 10 years. While it can't be denied that the show benefited greatly from brilliant production design, wonderful writing, beautiful music and a supporting cast that is second to none, the real reason the show succeeded and endured so well is due to the pitch-perfect casting of Jeremy Brett as the eponymous hero.
Then tell us about it.
Brett, a distinguished English Shakespearean actor and protégé of Laurence Olivier, was born on November 3rd, 1933 in Berkswell, England. He had a passion for acting that led him to train at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. With a career spanning stage and screen, Brett was celebrated for his dynamic performances in productions such as The Picture of Dorian Gray and My Fair Lady, before finally coming to the role that would define his career. Despite struggles with mental and physical health, his career left an indelible mark on the world of theatre and television before his untimely death. His portrayal of Holmes is often regarded as the definitive interpretation, characterised by a blend of intensity and charisma. To my mind, Brett's the only actor who completely encapsulates every aspect of the Holmes presented in Conan Doyle's writings, from brooding, drug-fueled intensity to wit, warmth, and his childlike penchant for theatrical games at the resolution of a mystery. Brett was said to have been relentlessly reading Doyle's stories during production, as well as the Baker Street Bible, a document created by the production company detailing all the nuances of the characters and locations, which undoubtedly added to the fidelity of his performance. While I could praise Brett's perfect vocal performance and line delivery until the cows come home,
I would like to see the housekeeper. What is her name? Mrs. Lexington?
She'll add nothing more to what you already know.
Nevertheless,
Where I think he really shines in this role is in his physical performance. To begin with, he looks remarkably like the Holmes described in Doyle's work and Sidney Paget's original Strand illustrations of the character. Tall, gaunt and commanding, with a hawk-like, almost vampiric look, but still every inch the fine, impeccably dressed Victorian gentleman. This is undeniably true, of course, of the quintessential silver screen versions portrayed by Basil Rathbone and the like. But what Brett adds to the performance is an incredible energy and excitement, throwing himself onto the floor to inspect footprints or leaping onto the precarious edge of a bridge to survey a crime scene with little regard for his own safety, caring only about the clues and the resolution of the case, showing us how entirely Holmes loses himself in his work. His whole performance is a symphony of energy, masterfully balanced. And this energy is even apparent when he sits perfectly still, as we, the audience, never know when he's going to burst into life, keeping the viewer constantly invested in the performance. Brett uses his hands wonderfully too, treating us to seemingly inexplicable and unpredictable gestures that add so beautifully to the fabric of the character, giving us a physical representation of his inner process. And consider also for a moment the way he sits in a chair, smoking with his feet up, also in the chair as he ponders his three-pipe problem, showing us how removed he is from his surroundings. It's impossible to imagine Dr. Watson or any of the other refined Victorian ladies and gentlemen described in the stories sitting this way, and it gives us such a great sense, in one tiny gesture, how removed he is from the world that surrounds him. He may be as impeccably dressed and refined in speech as his contemporaries, but through this small acting choice, we can tell that he's worlds apart from them. Another aspect of the performance that sets it apart is his sparing use of the smile, which often appears to leak out unintentionally, seeming to betray his inner thoughts. Despite the dark and brooding broad strokes of his characterization, Brett's Holmes is very often a playful and joyful interpretation.
I don't see there's anything very funny about it.
I also love Brett's use of the incredulous, Krabappel-esque ha, which he employs throughout the series, instantly and economically dismissing whatever lie or half-truth he's just been presented with.
There's something devilish in this, Watson.
Unlike many other portrayals which present Holmes as cold and borderline sociopathic, I'm looking at you, Cumberbatch. Brett's performance brings the warmth and kindness to the character that's abundant and palpable in the original story.
What a very amiable person.
Many adaptations portray Holmes as someone who's so wrapped up in his work that he doesn't entirely understand human relationships. However, I don't believe that to be the case. While he doesn't necessarily experience it at a very deep level, he knows intimately, of course, how humans and human relationships work. People and their interplay are at the heart of all his cases. He's simply sparing and economical with these interpersonal conventions and can use them when needed. It's simply that, unlike most people, he has little regard for how others view him.
Thank you.
He views these conventions simply as another tool in his deductive toolbox and only employs them when they're needed.
Thank you.
The exception to this, of course, seems to be romantic relationships, which Holmes seems to have very little first-hand experience of and very little need for, which Brett, again, portrays wonderfully.
Kiss a kiss.
I don't know how.
Brett's Holmes treats just about everyone in the series with just as much respect as they deserve, with the notable exception, of course, of the long-suffering Mrs. Hudson, around whom he always seems to act like a surly teenager.
Mrs. Hudson! Friend, Mrs. Hudson, you're hideously in the way.
Peterson, the commissionaire from opposite.
Oh, please,
He'd like a word
go
with you.
away.
But of course, Holmes is only ever half the puzzle. To appropriately bring the character to life and embody the original odd couple, the character of Dr. John Watson must be perfect too.
Of course.
Throughout the life of the show, the character of Watson was played, very ably, by two different actors. David Burke in seasons 1 and 2, and Edward Hardwicke for the remainder of the show's run. At the end of the second season, Burke had to leave the show and recommended Hardwicke as his replacement. And rarely in TV history has there been such a smooth transition after recasting a lead role. I confess that on my first viewing I didn't even notice that the actor had changed. This was made especially tricky too, given the added challenge that Hardwicke's debut, The Empty House, is the only episode in the series to be a direct continuation of the story in the previous episode, The Final Problem. The two performances, while both wonderful and definitely distinct in their own way, flow together almost seamlessly. Again, this is probably due to the production's fidelity to Conan Doyle's work. Both performances work because they're both being true to the Watson in the stories. For a long time, the character of Watson was done dirty by adaptations, often being portrayed as a bungling buffoon. The most notorious example of this, of course, is Nigel Bruce's portrayal in the Rathbone-era films.
Oh, sorry?
I should mention that I very much enjoy Bruce's performance, and in the context of the stories and cast he was working with, I think it works very well.
Sheriff, would you like to hear old Uncle make a noise like a duck?
This rendition of the character seeks to correct that, and portrays Watson as the sharp-witted, emotionally intelligent character from the stories. And while he's never on the same level as Holmes in terms of deduction, still serving the viewer in the role of everyman, he works well as a stimulus for Holmes's brilliance. As You Know Who himself describes it, a whetstone for his mind. Inhabiting the character of the world's most famous detective definitely took its toll on Brett, stating that Watson describes You Know Who as a mind without a heart, which is hard to play, hard to become. Some actors fear if they play Sherlock Holmes for a very long run, the character will steal their soul, leave no corner for the original inhabitant. Holmes has become the dark side of the moon for me. He's moody and solitary, and underneath, and really sociable and gregarious. It's all got too dangerous. Unfortunately, as the show progressed into its final series, The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, Brett's performance does begin to suffer very slightly due to his failing health, with him requiring an oxygen mask and apparently even collapsing on set at one point, before simply commenting, "But darlings, the show must go on." The lithium tablets he'd been prescribed caused him to gain weight and retain water, and while still delivering a first-class performance, he was no longer the cadaverous, hawk-like Holmes we'd once known. Despite these complications, he still gave it his all until the very end, showing unwavering dedication to and mastery of his craft. Brett died from heart failure on the 12th of September 1995 at his home in Clapham, at the age of 61, leaving behind 41 of the best adaptations in television history, and, in my mind, the very best performance of Sherlock Holmes to ever grace our screens.
No more words. Get out.